Oh, I'm starting the class now. I already did my Mangalacharana, and I was explaining what we were doing. So, for the benefit of those people who are on the other online class, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. Uh, Today we're continuing the Sri Caitanya Siksamrta of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We're in the seventh stream of the seventh rainfall. This rainfall, this particular group of chapters, is discussing the different rasas in relationship to Sri Krishna, right? Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madura. And we discussed all of those day after day, but now entering into Madura Rasa, we are faced with a much broader and deeper subject. In fact, this is obviously what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is bringing us to from the very beginning of this book, where he's discussing Varnashram Dharma as the secondary assistant rules to bhakti, and then the different stages of bhakti from Vaidhi Bhakti to Raganuga, what that means, and then the development of Raganuga in the development of bhakti in its different stages from Kanishta into Madhyam, awakening of Raganuga, and then the development of Bhav, and then the establishment or awakening of different rasas. And we heard about them. But now he's going to discuss the subject of Madura Bhakti Ras. And whereas the other ones were a few pages, which we could cover in a single class, this one is 40 pages long, Madura Bhakti Ras. And so it's going to take many days to read all of this. But he was going to make a point at the end of in the next chapter. What is the intent of this book? He says in the book, he's not really describing the Leela or the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. He's giving us a philosophical explanation of the spiritual realm, the spiritual reality, and the process to achieve it, so that our faith and our intelligence can be aligned with this, can be convinced, so that we can practice bhakti with great determination and confidence. So even though it's 40 pages long, this was his intent, because this book was published in 1886, and Jiva Dharma, which is very much the same subject matter, but spoken in a slightly different way, was published in 7 years later, 1893. And here he's not discussing Leela. When we talk about Madura Rasa, he's discussing the philosophy of Madura Rasa. And so this will give us the eligibility, the foundation, the background, so that when we do hear these pastimes, whatever the pastimes in Vrindavan, with the cowherd boys, with Mother Jashoda, with the Brajadevis, the beloved Brajadevis, we can understand this in an appropriate way and not try to impose our limited material conceptions, and not be affected by our own lack of realization, so that when we do listen to these pastimes, we listen to them with faith and the appropriate effect, which is described in the Bhagavatam, step by step, from Shenvatam Svakata Krishna Nasta Prayastabhadreshu, the development of first the removal of anarthas, development of faith, becoming fixed in bhakti, and then eliminating the influence of the modes of nature, first being situated in sattva gun, and then shuddha sattva, and then direct realization in the heart. All of this described. So here he's going into an extensive deliberation on Madura Rasa. So don't be afraid to hear this. So, as I already did the Mangalacharana, we'll begin this chapter. Okay? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, for the benefit of those jivas who are qualified, and what is the qualification? Interest, awakening interest, greed, curiosity, right? That qualifies us. We are philosophically describing the glories of the truth concerning Madura Rasa, the transcendental conjugal mellow of devotion. A small part of the conversation between Vijay Kumar and Srimad Gopal Guru Goswami regarding the subject matter of this ras is recorded in the 31st chapter of my book, Jiva Dharma. This is going to be mentioned here. The faithful readers are kindly asked to consider the following with a focused mind, and may they then become inclined towards it. Okay, so he's mentioning that Jiva Dharma book, which is not yet published when he was providing this. So here's the conversation. Vijay, this is when Vijay Kumar and his nephew, Rajanath, have, with the permission of Raghunath Das Babaji Maharaj, they've gone to Jagannath Puri, and by his advisement, they are taking further instruction, further shiksha from Gopal Guru Goswami, the disciple, beloved disciple of Virkeshwar Pandit. All right? So, Vijay asks, Prabhu, of the principal rasas, Madura Rasa has been described as being that ras which is very mysterious. And why not? Since the qualities of the other four rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, and Vatsalya, are eternally present in Madura Rasa, whatever astonishing and wonderful qualities they lack are completely and beautifully established in Madura Rasa. Consequently, Madura Rasa is without any doubt superior to all others. Madura Rasa is quite inappropriate for those who take shelter of the path of impersonal renunciation because their hearts are dry. At the same time, those who are attracted to mundane sense gratification also find Madura Rasa difficult to understand because it is exactly the opposite of mundane nature. That's important. This is a very good statement because people, when they read it, they criticize Madura Rasa because they equate it with the reflection that we see in this material world, the loving affairs between embodied living beings, conditioned living beings. And the pure qualities of love and devotion, the pure exchange of love between the devotee and the Lord, are reflected in a perverted manner, so that the object and enjoyer of ras becomes oneself because of false ego. And so the pure and lofty experience of love in connection with God is not touched. And we try to experience that result by attachment with inanimate objects, with the things of this world, things that we might acquire, and with exchanges with other conditioned entities who are similarly embodied and similarly restricted in their own understanding and capacity to taste and give love, right? So this is going to inform us of that higher nature of love and then excite us about that possibility and give us a means to make the comparison. When we think about love, we can think about the limits of our own material experience in that. So this is where the philosophical description is so valuable. So at the same time, those who are attracted to mundane sense gratification also find Madura Rasa difficult to understand because it is exactly the opposite of mundane nature. The Madura Rasa of Braj is not easy to attain because it is completely different from conjugal love within the material world. So why does the aprakat Madura Rasa, that means the spiritual, unmanifest materially, Madura Rasa, appear to be just like the despicable mundane rasa between men and women in this material existence? Why does it appear to be like that? Because when you just read the descriptions, dancing, embracing, kissing, all of that, that's done here. But there's a great gulf of difference between them. And that's going to be described here. The heading is The Material World is a Perverted Reflection of the Spiritual World. So, Gopal Guru Goswami replies to Vijay. Vijay, you know well that all the varieties in the mundane sphere are a reflection of the varieties in the transcendental sphere. And the material world itself is also the reflection of the spiritual world. Okay, let's see, a footnote here. Oh my goodness, what is this? This huge verse. Let me see, what is that from? The Chandogya Upanishad, 8th chapter. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm going to read that evidential verse. He's saying that this material sphere is a reflection of the pure spiritual world. All right? So, there are 8th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad. He's quoting 6 verses, and they're very long. I'll read the translation. 1. Let's see. Just to give you an idea. Shama chabalam prapadye, shabalat chayamanam prapadye, ashva iva romani vidhuya papam chandra iva raho makarat. Okay. By service to Krishna, one attains the transcendental abode of divine bliss, which is full of wondrous pastimes. And by reaching that transcendental abode of wonders, one attains Krishna. And it says this may also apply to Srimati Radhika. One gives up this body like the moon shakes off Rahu, or like a horse shakes off hair. In the city of Brahma, Brahm, there is an abode, the small lotus of the heart, and within it is a small sky. Now, what exists within that small sky, that is to be sought after. That is what one should desire to understand. Then the next 2 verses. If they should say to him, now with regard to the abode, the small lotus in this city of Brahm, and the small sky, the Lord within it, what is there in it that is to be sought after? And what is there that one should desire to understand? Then he, the teacher, should say, quote, as far as this great Lord extends within the heart, to that extent he expands without, just like the sky. Both heaven and earth are contained within him. Both fire, air, both sun and moon, both lightning and stars, and whatever belongs to him, the embodied creature in this world, and whatever does not, all that is contained within him. That's the first 3 verses. And this is the nature of the Upanishads. They're saying something, but oftentimes they're a little indirect, right? And the meaning has to be extracted through realization. And so if one is not fixed in the personalistic conception through realization, it may be very difficult to detect this deeper understanding, right? Because there are statements in the Upanishads which relate to the impersonal aspect of the Lord. I mean, he does have an impersonal aspect. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdite. He's realized in 3 phases by different kinds of persons. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is quoting this Chandogya Upanishad, and this is discussed also, I remember, in the Jiva Dharma. This particular verse in another section is quoted. And the name Sham is saying that this is one of the names of Krishna It denotes the personality of Krishna. From that statement, you can extract the personalistic meaning of this verse. All right, so now he's saying that everything, there's this abode, and it's all, everything that we understand is encompassed from and within the reality of the Supreme Person. And so the next verse, if the pupil should say, quote, if everything that exists, all beings and all desires, is contained in this city of Brahm, then what is left of it when old age overcomes it or when it perishes? Then the next verse, then the teacher should say, the Supreme Lord, as described as the Akash in the heart, the Supreme Lord does not age with the death of the body. He does not die. The Brahm, and not the body, is the real city of Brahm. In it, all desires are contained. He is the self, free from sin, free from old age, free from death, free from grief, free from hunger, free from thirst. His all desires come true. His thoughts come true. Just as here on earth people follow as they are commanded by a leader and depend upon whatever objects they desire, be it a country or a piece of land, in the same way, all depend upon him for the fulfillment of their desires. And then the last verse, upon leaving his body, the devotee attains the highest abode. He attains his eternal nature and form. Bhagavan is immortal, fearless, possessed of unlimited qualities. He is Satya, the supreme truth. So that is indicating that even while embodied, we have that Lord within our heart. There's that place where he exists. And that Lord is the source of all creation, material and spiritual. And that there's an opportunity for that soul to realize the dimensions of that existence beyond the birth, death, old age, disease that we experience in this realm. And then, in fact, all desires, whether they're the limited and mundane, or whether they're the higher and purer aspirations of spirituality, they all are fulfilled by him alone. So, Goswami answered, all those verses were an answer to this. Vijay, you know well that all the varieties in the mundane sphere are a reflection of the varieties in the transcendental sphere. And the material world itself is also the reflection of the spiritual world. Okay, and then that Chandogya Upanishad was given. There is a profound secret in this, namely, that the nature of the reflected experience is naturally reversed. I was going to look at a mirror, right? I think even when you look at this book, it is reflected. I think the type is reversed, right? So when we look in a mirror, everything is reversed. It looks the same, but when closer examination, it's reversed. Whatever is most exalted in the original existence or form becomes most abominable in the reflection. And whatever is lowest in the original form is seen as highest in its reflected existence. Every part and limb of a body appears in a reversed form in its reflection in a mirror. Similarly, the Paramavastu, supreme transcendental reality, is reflected by the influence of his own inconceivable Shakti. The shadow of that Shakti has expanded itself in full detail in the form of mundane existence. Consequently, all the characteristics of the Paramavastu appear in their reversed form in material existence. So think about that. That everything in this world, in fact, even though it goes against the deeper instincts of the soul, what we consider grand and wonderful in this world is very opposite of what is considered grand and wonderful in the spiritual world. For instance, the idea of servitude, which we're discussing here, selfless love. In today's society, that's castigated because in this world, selfless love is generally exploited, right? If somebody's giving, generally they come into contact with people of a narcissistic or sociopathic nature who exploit them. There's no loving, genuine reciprocation, right? The idea of humility, that's not very highly commended. Everything, especially the more and more society so-called advances, degrades, it's all about me, 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 me. And even in relationships between men and women, why are they failing now? Because the essential tenets of support and servitude to one another, right, for a higher purpose. Marriage is actually originally about a higher purpose. It's a religious function, joining two people together so that they can cooperate, protect one another from irreligiosity, from unrestricted pursuit of sense enjoyment, focus those, desires in the material world, raise children that are spiritually inclined, promote a society that has spiritual values, but now it's all become completely narcissistic, right? And so the idea of relationship, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? And therefore rather than cooperation, there's competition in the relationship, rather than seeing the relationship based on the man has specific talents, strengths, and weaknesses. The woman has specific talents and strengths and weaknesses. If they focus on supporting each other and with that understanding, naturally, biologically and psychologically, are different natures, then they combine in a way that can enhance one another's capacity and value and happiness. But if they're competing with one another all the time, which is what now society has become, then there won't be any development, any real happiness. Because development means living in such a way that one's spiritual aspirations are supported. The spiritual focus becomes the focus of our activities. And when we think only of ourselves as this body, the less and less we have spiritual knowledge, the less and less the values of spirituality are integrated into any aspect of our life. And then it just becomes chaos, animal society. He's going to discuss that in the last chapter. He discussed it earlier, and in the last chapter we're going to get some more review of that, right? So the shadow of the Shakti, right, this material energy, has expanded itself in full detail in the form of mundane existence. So all the characteristics of the Paramavastu, right, the Supreme Lord and his abode, appear in their reversed form in the material existence. Right? So we become the Vishaya, and so everybody wants to be on the top. Nobody wants to be the servant, everybody wants to be the object of adoration and service. But what would you rather be? The object of adoration and service from a bunch of conditioned and selfish and personally motivated, living beings, or to be in a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord and His most beloved. And even though Krishna is your Vishaya, the object of your love, when our love becomes completely selfless and pure, then He reciprocates and we become the object of His love. And then we taste this extraordinary love that's reciprocated on the spiritual level between Krishna and His eternally perfected devotees, and between Krishna and His complete counterpart, Srimati Radhika. I don't know. Not a hard choice if we really study this deeply, and the possibility and the joy. Just have to keep that in the forefront. Selfless love. Transcendental Ras, which is the very nature of Paramavastu, is reflected in this insentient material world as the abominable mundane Ras. The astonishing, matchless, variegated happiness in the Paramavastu is its own innate Ras. But when it is reflected in the inert plane, the conditioned jiva imagines that this principle has material designations and attributes. He then decides that the spiritual substance is only formless and featureless, nirvishesh, and imagines that since variety is absent in the nirvishesh tattva, all kinds of variety must be essentially mundane. Consequently, he cannot comprehend the eternal nature of transcendental existence, which is free from all material attributes, because it is totally beyond them. This is the inevitable result of using logic to try to understand the truth. So he's alluding there to what we had heard earlier, that the unfortunate conditioned soul, seeing his attempts to enjoy in this world frustrated at every step, may begin pursuing a path of spiritual realization. But without the association of bhaktas and without awakening the understanding and appreciation of devotion, they simply use logic and reasoning, material intelligence, to understand that which is beyond the material world. And so if you say, in this world, what is causing my distress? It's the interaction with all these things, forms, activities, variety, features, all this is causing distress. So the spiritual plane must be without any of these. And see, this is causing me unhappiness, that is causing me confusion, that is causing me limitation, this is causing me repeated birth and death. So that which is spiritual, it must not be this, must not be that, must not be that. So they end up with, nirgun without, qualities, nirvishesh without features, nirvishesh tattva, nothing. Just we merge into a formless oneness of spirituality. And in that way, we become one with the Supreme. And in a way, it fulfills ultimately their objective to be the one and only, right? That same neglect of love towards the Supreme Lord and the lack of inclination towards relationship and devotion, until that's awakened, we'll still be attracted even to that formless, featureless existence, which in Brihad Bhagavatamrita is described in detail, like it's beyond all material distress, certainly. And one is situated in spirituality, but it's a spirituality of sleep. And just like in this world, we take pleasure in sleep, we take shelter of sleep. At the end of the day, we're compelled to sleep. And if we can sleep without disturbance, then that state of being in that sleep, that's very desirable. We resist even waking up sometimes, right? Oh, God, go away, I don't want to wake up. So many problems are ahead of me throughout the day. So Gopakumara saw that directly. He saw all these living entities, these little points of light and consciousness, but they were dormant and existing in that Brahmajyoti. And he even found himself attracted to it for a moment, until the power of his mantra, which was given to him by his guru, which awakened and stimulated in him this desire for service and interaction, love between the Lord, that protected him from that. Right? So we're being protected from that to the extent that reading this, we understand that there's something much beyond that. Otherwise, there's an attraction. To get away from misery, we might do anything, right? This world is really an unfortunate place. So we imagine that variety is absent. All variety is mundane, so only using logic, we can't conceive of spiritual variety. So this is the inevitable result of using logic to try to understand the truth. So then he gives us a description of the variety of ras. He says, this is Goswami, actually the Paramavastu is full of astonishing varieties because it is the embodiment of all rasa. Since spiritual varieties are reflected in mundane ras, one can take help from the varieties of mundane ras to infer the existence and qualities of the spiritual ras that is beyond one's sense perception. Right. So, rather than, okay, let me just read the varieties of ras in the Paramavastu are as follows. In the spiritual world, the Shanta Dharma that embodies Shanta Ras is in the lowest position. Above this is Dasya Ras. Above that is Sakya Ras. Above Sakya Ras is Vatsalya Ras. And Madura Ras reigns splendidly above all. Right? So basically, the idea is what the Greeks would say, as above, so below. The reason there is a reality to this material world is because there's a reality beyond this, the spiritual. The spiritual is the source of this, but this is an incomplete, imperfect version of that. See, because if there were not spiritual variety in this, if spiritual reality was not full of variety, then how could it exist here? Where would it come from? Right? So, I don't know if this is going to be quoted, but Srila Prabhupada gave us Isha Upanishad, and in the very beginning, Om Purnamidam Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate, that the Supreme is complete and perfect, and therefore everything that exists emanates from him and also has its own individuality and completeness. And so that refers to us as a soul. We also are tiny parts of that complete whole, complete in our own way, but dependent. And the material energy as well is coming from that Supreme, right? Coming from that Supreme. And it has its completeness and identity because it's coming, although reflected, you could say pervertedly, it's a reality, right? Because the Maya Shakti is a special expansion from the Shakti of Mahavishnu, Ramadevi, for the very purpose of the creation and overseeing of this material world. So now he's going to explain that Krishna is the only enjoyer and the jivas are enjoyed. So in the material world, everything is in the reverse order. So Madura Ras is on the lowest level. Vatsalya is above it, Sakya is above Vatsalya, and Shanta Ras is the highest of all. The position and activities of the reflection of Madura Ras in the mundane world are extremely petty and shameful. Consequently, people who deliberate on Rasa Tattva from the mundane perspective conclude that Madura Ras is wretched and contemptible. When they're talking about that, they mean that the unrestricted love, and which is going to be described later, parakia, unwedded love, that if Krishna's activities with the gopis were imitated in the material world, it would be contemptible, right? Without moral basis, without moral restraint and guideline. See? So, actually, in the spiritual world, it is completely pure, immaculate, and full of astonishing sweetness. There, the meeting of Krishna with his various types of Shakti as Purush Prakriti is completely pure and the origin of all truth. And in order to help awaken appreciation of that, you read Ramananda Roy explaining to Mahaprabhu about how the gopis' love is topmost, and then he explains the selflessness of it, the pure selflessness. And then the reciprocation, because when Krishna says, he explains in Bhagavad Gita, Yeyatamam prapadyante tangstataiva bhajamyam, however you approach me, I reciprocate accordingly. And so when somebody approaches Krishna with such selfless love, he becomes completely captivated and bound and attempting in every way to reciprocate that. That's described so beautifully in the Ras Panchadhyaya, those 5 chapters of Rasa Leela, but also you get some detail about this in Gopal Champu in the description of Krishna stealing the garments of the unmarried gopis who want him as a husband. He reacts and reciprocates with them as only a husband would, even though materially it's considered immoral what he's doing with them. But when we see the nature of their exchange and the transformation of their emotions, the appreciation of the extraordinary nature, even though he appears to be putting the gopis into such distress, internally they're experiencing such a joy, extraordinary happiness. And then ultimately Krishna, when he demands that they perform the ultimate sacrifice and apparent humiliation of coming out of the water completely naked, exposed in every way to him, which violates all rules of morality in this world. The gopis shed all of those conceptions in order to please him. And he says, if you do this, then because I want to become submissive to you. So in other words, if you can do this for me, then you have purchased me. I become completely submissive to you. And then we have this extraordinary nature of the dealings between Krishna and the gopis. Eternal competition to give pleasure and happiness to the other. With the utmost cleverness and utmost variety, seeking to please the other. And then all the pastimes and all the moods and all the exchanges of everything they do is seen in that light. When Radhika is showing man to Krishna, some jealousy, some sulky mood, some rejection, it's to enhance his love and make him more determined to have relationships with her. And when he does something clever which seems to cause the gopis some impediment or distress, again, the same thing. Right? In the material world, the mundane behavior between men and women is indeed shameful. However, there is no transgression of dharma in the spiritual world because Krishna is the only Purush, and all the chit tattvas in this rasa are prakriti. In the material world, one jiva becomes enjoyer, and the other jiva becomes the enjoyed, and they want to relate with each other in that way. This affair becomes abhorrent and shameful because it is completely opposed to fundamental tattva. In other words, the fundamental tattva is that we are jiva shakti, we are prakriti. Our inherent nature is to have a relationship with the Supreme Purush. This will give us the greatest happiness and will give him the greatest happiness. This is the fulfillment of our very purpose, right? And to try to relate Prakriti to Prakriti, it doesn't work, right? It's like two magnets. If you have both of them, did you ever have, when I was a kid, we had these little miniature dogs, these little tiny dogs with magnets at the bottom. And you put them together, and if you put the wrong end, then they repel each other. But when you put them together in the right way, they're attracted, right? So basically, we're Prakriti, so we're both negative, right? And so really we're trying to enjoy, but the more we do, the reality of it is we can't, right? We have to be attracted to the Purush, the positive, and then positive and negative, bound in such a way that we can never be separated, right? So, right. They want to relate with each other in this way, these two Prakritis. This affair becomes abhorrent and shameful because it is completely opposed to fundamental tattva, to reality, right? In tattva, one jiva is not the enjoyer of another jiva. On the contrary, Sri Krishna is the only enjoyer, and all jivas are to be enjoyed by him. The situation in which the jiva becomes the enjoyer is against his eternal dharma. And actually, there is no doubt that this state of affairs is utterly shameful and despicable. From the perspective of reality and its reflection, it is inevitable that the behavior of mundane men and women will appear to be identical to Krishna's immaculate pastimes, even though one is thoroughly base and the other is supremely valuable and meaningful. So as long as our eyes and our knowledge are veiled by the material conditioning, then we can't understand the nature of that spiritual reality. And when we see it, we take it to be just like our own. And thus our conception of it is a degraded conception, right? So Vijay responds to Gopal Guru. Prabhu, now that I have heard this unprecedented Siddhanta and conception, my purpose has been accomplished. My self-evident conviction has now become firm, and all my doubts are dispelled. I have now understood the position of Madura Rasa within the spiritual world. Aho, just as the very word Madura Rasa means sweet, its transcendental bhav also gives rise to such supreme bliss, Paramananda. Who is so fortunate as one who finds satisfaction? Who is so unfortunate as one who finds satisfaction in Shanta Rasa, when there is a Rasa such as Madura Rasa? Prabhu, I wish to hear the elaborate and full explanation of the philosophy and principles of the confidential Madura Rasa. Please be merciful. All right, so that's the beginning. Then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, deliberation on the pastimes of Braj with complete faith, he says, O devotee readers, that's us, right? Please understand the transcendental beauty of Madura Rasa, as the knower of truths Vijay Kumar did. And may deep faith in this awaken within you. To the degree that you cultivate a following of the pastimes of Braj, then to that same degree, direct realization of your own transcendental moods will awaken within you. So here he is giving us a blessing, an opportunity to pursue this from the philosophical perspective, but also to study the pastimes of Krishna, not to neglect them, but to study them through the lens of the philosophical explanations that he's given. And by that Madura Rasa can awaken. And without it, it can't. Okay. So that's what we're going to start tomorrow. Okay. So we offer obeisance once again to our Divine Master, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, our Divine Diksha and Shiksha Guru, and to our Shiksha and Sannyas Guru, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and to our Rupanuga Guru Varga, our Guru Parampara, to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda, and to Sri Sri Radha Govinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I don't know how long, this is going to take many days to complete this. Haribol, Haribol.